Hey, it's Rob Ryan. Welcome back to Entrepreneurial Thinkers. I just had one of the most joyful, purely joyful, energy-filled episodes we've ever recorded in the history of the show. And if you're interested in where kind of the intersection of where art and creativity meet commerce and community in the vein of entrepreneurial thinking, then this is an episode you want to explore. If you're an East Coaster in New York, this is an episode you 100% want to listen to, because the artist that we talked with, Robert Newman III, is local there in Harlem. And if you are anybody who's interested in how to get into the world of creativity and artist life from a professional career standpoint, like, you want to listen to this because he gives you the roadmap. And if you are a business person who believes that art, or a political leader or a community leader who believes that art is central to community development, you want to listen to this episode. Or maybe you're someone who doesn't believe that art is central to community development and economic growth, then you're definitely going to want to listen to this episode. So I always say, like, I hope you enjoyed as much as we enjoyed making it. And this example is like an over-the-top example of that. I truly hope that you're able to tap into some of the joy that I was able to tap into by amplifying Robert's voice and his unique life experiences and his unique perspective, because there is a ton of information to unpack and learn from here, but there's also just a ton of just positive energy and inspiration from one of our country's youngest, most dynamic, creative minds and creators. So I hope you enjoy. Hola, hello, hi, bienvenido, welcome back, or welcome to Entrepreneurial Thinkers. I am really grateful to be joined by Robert Newman III today, because it's a nice chance to get to meet him in person. We met each other kind of virtually last year. But I'm also really confident that he's going to help us shed a really unique light on the intersection of art, community, and what we'll call entrepreneurial thinking and entrepreneurial and economic empowerment in communities. So first, let me tell you a little bit about him. Robert's a self-taught, multidisciplinary artist who originally hails from Tulsa, Oklahoma, but he's now living in Harlem in New York City, where he's joining us from today. He's best known for his evocative expressionist portraits. Robert's work delves deep into the narratives of Black folks through a historical lens, weaving his experiences from the South into his art now. He was inspired originally by his grandmother's entrepreneurial spirit in the historic Greenwood district in Tulsa, which he'll tell us more about later. And he has transformed his early passion into a vibrant career now. From showcasing his art in New York City galleries to exploring new mediums like fashion and photography, Robert's mission is clear. To represent, heal, and uplift his community, and frankly, uplift the rest of us through powerful storytelling and creative expression. So again, I'm super grateful to have a chance to have him here today to share some of his story and some of his perspectives on entrepreneurial thinking. Robert, welcome to the show, buddy.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here, and thank you for that intro. When you say it like that, it almost doesn't sound like me, but as you recount it all, I'm going through the steps and happy to share every step along the journey.
It is absolutely you. That's the best part about those intros, right? Is that, like, if nothing else, you're gonna feel good about yourself the rest of the day.
It sounds exhausting. I mean, to say the least. When I hear it said like all together, sometimes it could be a bit overwhelming. So from the creative point of view, it's interesting or helpful for me to break it down. And I know we're probably going to get into bigger questions soon, but even from a framework of like entrepreneurial thinking, that mindset always serves me, just breaking it down in the small task. And for today, I'm just an artist.
Yeah, 100% true. So thanks for, you're like my co-host now. So you just gave me a great segue, right? So thank you for that. We're gonna unpack a lot of your story. We're gonna obviously touch. I want to hear that inspirational story a little bit later on how on your mom or your grandmom's life, and kind of how that had such a huge impact on you. But before we get into all that, I want to just kind of put out a big marker to start out right away. I know a lot of people that listen to the show, let's call them like tech entrepreneurs or investors in the startup ecosystem around the world, right? They may not even have artists in their circles. They may not even know artists. So first things first, I would love for you to help explain kind of how entrepreneurial is the life of a working artist.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that question. I feel like a lot of times the question is what informs the conversation. And unfortunately, a lot of artists don't ask that piece enough. A lot of people are very interested in their work being viewed in prominent spaces or working with galleries or being published. But the entrepreneurial piece is very important, right? Like, how do you actually eat if you want to be a full-time artist, or if you want to create passive income? Like, are you doing this more to just as a passion or a hobby? And there's nothing wrong with that, because for a long time I've been
Right.
a career artist in that way. There are things that I do for display versus things that I do just for myself. Is this something that, again, you kind of want to build into maybe $100, $1,000 a month? That's the entrepreneurial piece. Or do you want to create for a living? Are you interested in making up ideas and figuring out ways for people to continue to be inspired by those or be interested in those, or basically sell your know-how and your
Yeah.
creativity?
How did you navigate those very questions that you just presented?
Yeah, I went to school for business, but it was super. I want to say, I mean, you said why grandma was impactful. It was amazing to see her work in person, because she's a relentless creator. She still complains to this day that she didn't have a protege that really took up her mantle, because self-taught
Oh,
porcelain
okay.
dolls are it's a master level craft. It's sculpting involved, it's painting involved, it's fabric work, and she mixes the clay and she installs the actual eyelashes. So when I tell
Wow.
people the full journey from like the 4-year-old Robert working in the doll shop to where I am today, I always joke and say, I'm a bad sculptor. Grandma just she still has a lot of feedback on the paintings, but it was amazing to see, because it was not limiting. One, I had an artist that was in front of me that was working within a huge amount of modalities, a huge amount of mediums, and thinking creatively through fabric or textiles or through touch or textures or even smells at some points. She taught herself how to play the piano. She's very good at architectural projects, which is very odd to me, but I guess the
Hmm.
dolls and architecture go hand in hand.
Interesting.
Um, and she actually started her doll shop from the hobby. Like the dolls grew to a point to where they were occupying spaces in the house that they were becoming cumbersome. My grandfather was starting to, complain a little bit, and they came together and decided to get the storefront that just so happens to be in Greenwood, right?
Okay.
As they get the shop, and my grandmother is sitting there with the windows open to catch the natural light, to weave the clothes together, a newspaper article or a newspaper reporter walks by and says, "What's going on here? Like, are you opening soon, or are you guys like taking orders?" And she says, "No, this is just like my studio space." And he ended up writing an article about her. And from there on, she just called it Destiny Dolls for
Ah,
of us as Black people going towards the future. She used
yeah.
to do this story all the
Wow.
time growing up called "We Used to Be Giants." We used to be giants, right? So Destiny Doll,
Right.
her idea of like, how do I continue to tell this story? And the funny part on so seeing again her build the business from scratch as like a young man, and working on my own small art projects, and people coming in and asking if they could buy it from me at like 4, 5, 6 years old. Um,
So
that's
at so at 4 or 5, 6 years old, you weren't presented with that quandary of, okay, do I want to make like $100 off this, or do I want to make $1,000 off this, or do I want to make a live? Like you didn't have to face that yet. Eventually, at some point in your life story, young life story, still, you did face that question. Like, is this a side light? Is this a side hustle, a hobby? Is it just something that, like, if someone paid me for it, it'd be great. If they
yeah.
don't pay me for it, I could just get them displayed. That'd be awesome, right?
Mhm.
And you eventually, you did make decisions that kind of turned it into more of a, you're a working career
Yeah.
artist. Like, how did you navigate those decisions?
Me and grandma decided the first time. So when I
Ah,
asked her,
okay.
someone similar to her story with the newspaper article, right? So by the time I was there in the doll shop, the store had been there for maybe like 10 or 15 years. Someone came in and saw me working in the window, and I was weaving potholes, and they asked, "What are you doing here? Like, are those pot holders for sale?" And I looked at my grandma like, "For sale? Like she gave me this, and this is her stuff, and I'm cool."
Uh,
And grandma said, "Well, if you made it with your hands and you want to sell it, you can sell it." And I said, "Well, how much do I sell it for?" She goes, "However much you want to sell it for. Like, you pick a price and see if they agree." I sold it for $5, and I remember vividly for the next like year and a half, every single person in my family had one of these pot holders. They were like hanging on the refrigerator. They were like
okay.
closets and toolboxes for my dad, and in the lawn equipment. They were just everywhere. I don't know if people were paying me or not, but I was like, "Oh, this is amazing." If I just make the pot holders, I get $5. I could just go to the store, I get candy, I could do whatever. I never thought of that. And from there,
Right.
when I say I decided, I think it wasn't necessarily do I want to do this for $100 or $1,000. I was like, this seems like the coolest thing in the world. This would the pot holders
Okay.
were nothing. Somebody gave me materials, and because I arranged it a certain way or I thought it looked clever, they would be willing to appreciate that.
That's incredible. So part of the answer is like at a formative age, you understood that there was economic value attached to things you could create.
Exactly.
Right. Right. Yeah. So maybe, and I've met and we've interviewed a few. I've interviewed singers. I've interviewed actresses,
Mhm.
creative people in television, movie industry here in Los Angeles. Right. And sometimes there's that. I'm thinking of one of our guests, Courtney Cole, who's a very successful music artist, and she said that there was a point, she would sing in her local church, right? And she just loved to sing, and she explains how she kind of never thought about the business until she was in the business, right? She just loved to sing, and she was gifted with a voice. And then it was when the industry people were around her and they started explaining to her the potential economic opportunity that was there for her, that she kind of went, "Oh, wow." We talked to an actress last year who's a writer, producer, also stand-up comedian, and they explained similarly, kind of, they were professionals before they ever really stopped to think about the professional part of it, right? And so here you are as a little boy, and your grandmother not only inspired you, but she left you with this one really important economic kind of business lesson, which was that there was economic value, and you understood that right away. That's fascinating.
Going back to the question, right? She said, "How much do you want to charge?" She could have just given me an answer, and that would have been important enough. It would have set me, for maybe step one or two. But because she charged it back to me in a question, it never answered anything. It just opened it up. Well, how much do you want to charge? And I never knew that that was an important question to even consider.
Yeah.
So
No, it's incredible.
one other example, which is really funny. So you heard me say earlier, everybody had the pot holders, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, it was my first big idea. And I think the part of art that is most entrepreneurial is that the amount of pivots that you have to make or that you're willing to make usually directly correlate to your career or to your success. As a 4-year-old, I littered these things everywhere. I thought that this was the best thing since sliced bread, and that was it. That would be a child prodigy, and no school, no justice, no nothing, no punishment, all the candy I could want. Because I had
Right.
orders for the world, and it didn't work. It didn't work. It didn't work, and it wasn't for maybe. And I still did stuff like I went to like art camp with grandma because she did stuff like that, and I took art classes. So for my mom, because my grandmother was who she was and her family is who they are, art for my mother was a mandatory practice.
Okay.
So we all played instruments. I played the trumpet growing up. We were all in like the marching band for a bit. I did marching band the longest. Did concert band, and funny enough, music was also again a first love. And
Yeah.
I want to say I started playing the trumpet in 5th grade, and maybe around like high school or it definitely was high school because I knew we were starting to think about college. I realized that I didn't necessarily have the inspiration or the drive or the curiosity to be Wynton Marsalis,
Okay.
Louis Armstrong, to be Dizzy Gillespie. And I said, okay, Okay, it wasn't the potholders. The music
Right.
was my big idea. I invested a lot into the music thing, but I'm still extremely passionate about it. I love this space. I love
Yeah.
being able to again express what's in my brain for other people in a way
Yeah.
that's again beneficial, in a way that I could do it and love what I'm doing, and that other people would appreciate it as well.
You said something briefly right before we got on air, which I love, is this idea that, people, a lot of times people mistakenly kind of mix together like creativity or art,
Mhm.
and they're not. Yes, they are mixed when they're mixed, right? But they're not necessarily related things. Like, you can be deeply creative and not be artistic in the traditional sense of what art might be defined as, but you
Mhm.
could be deeply creative, or you could be, I, like myself, I often joke, I like you, played musical instruments as a kid, but then I pivoted towards sports in high school age, and away from the musical instruments. But I always say that, like, business, or now the business of conversation, podcasts, writing, those types of things, that's my art. That's my art, right? I couldn't paint a lick. I couldn't play the piano. I couldn't sing a song to somebody if I wanted to. But
Yeah.
I am an artist in this sense. Like, I am creative. You went through a period of creativity.
Hmm.
Creativity seemed to be the thread that kept pulling on you throughout your life, and then you just found different modes of expression.
Hmm. No, that's exactly it. There's this is a big pivot, but I'll zoom out for a second from a almost just human theory of knowledge standpoint. Art is one of those archaic words that it's so old, it's inherently encompassing of everything. It represents all things that we as individuals are relating to society as. It's beautiful, as efficient, as a little bit more than what we typically see, or the mundane. It came to our awareness. That's why we call it art. So when we get into the art of business, or the art of finance, or the art of law, those people that become really skilled at it is because art is such an old practice.
Yeah, interesting.
And that the idea and the path of the master is the same. You have to study the thing for a certain amount of time. You have to have dedicated hours of practice and real life experience before you could get to that last level of theory and invention. That,
Wow.
and when you say what's the entrepreneurial spirit, a lot of times we think that the one big idea is the one that'll get us there, and a lot of times it's understanding the systems and being patient and disciplined enough to go through that entire process. Like,
I mean, that may be the powerful takeaway of this conversation today, but that's an amazing insight, as you say, and it ties. Thank you, because it ties it back to my broader thesis of this show, which is this. It's born of my own life experiences, right? It's just my viewpoint at my age and my level of experience, or and I humbly say this, mastery of certain things,
mm-hmm,
that I've looked at the broader scale, like landscape of entrepreneurship, and said, the way we present it, the way we teach it, the way we engage with it is too limiting, right? It's too narrow. The truth is, as I say in the background of the show, is, I for the better best world that we need, for the ability to solve and tackle the problems and seize the opportunities. Like, we need entrepreneurial thinkers as politicians. Like, we need entrepreneurial thinking doctors. We need entrepreneurial thinking scientists and educators and professors and nurses and librarians and, city sanitation managers. Like, we need entrepreneurial thinkers at, like, every level of society. And I wow, I
mm-hmm.
mean, you just gave us kind of like a working explanation of the practical way that applies itself across both, kind of, again, an economic background, but also just an artistic. That's awesome. Thank you.
So let me bring it back to your question, because I said I pivoted and I promised I was going to bring us back. So the difference between art and creativity: if art is the grandfather, creativity is one of the grandchildren.
All
So
right.
you take creativity wherever you go, because creativity is that idea that we could approach a problem from 4 or 5 different dimensions, and that's where things become unlimited, and like a little bit beyond sometimes, like where we want to stop and do things in the business world. Business always comes down to it. I get very frustrated when I hear people say the goal of every business is to make money, and I'm like, that's short-sighted. That's capitalism. That's keep it simple, stupid. Not the
Yeah.
full saying, which is keep it simple but nothing less. Keep it simple,
Right.
nothing less. So if we have this idea of like creativity wherever we go, we're no longer approaching things as binary. We make money or we don't. There are a multiverse of madness of solutions that we should be measuring in terms of KPIs. How did people
Yeah.
feel? Who
Oh,
felt included? Who are the folks that were in the room to help make the decision? Who are the
yep.
authors of this story? Who got to listen? And when people start thinking about it from, I keep saying the question. There was this really, and again, I'm skipping ahead, my bad.
It's okay. No, it's okay, man.
Question, but there's in terms of practical advice, there's this book that really opened me up by Warren Berger called
Okay.
A More Beautiful Question. And then he had a follow-up book called The Book of Beautiful Questions. He talked about
Awesome.
how some of the most impactful innovations through our entire time have been inspired by questions as opposed to answers. And when I read the book and started thinking about, again, art, from a sense of like what we mean in an almost archaic sense, it brought me back to this idea of like the Socratic method. The way that we should interact with the world is always through curiosity and inquest, not necessarily this stagnation of I know it works, it'll keep working. Entrepreneurial thinking, creativity, art, they're all kind of in that same category, but creativity specifically is the practice of going in and saying, yesterday I started from square one, but today I'll start from square 39.
Right.
Started from the left, but tomorrow I'm just gonna jump on top of like there it the language is very funny, but it's like it's a 360 inward, outward. You want to be able to make those ask those questions in a way where they're open, where they're closed, where they're
Sure.
inviting to new ideas, even with changing up of the language. And that's what creativity is. If you go into
Yeah.
business every single
Beautiful.
day of every single year saying, how do we make more money? Then what will happen is you'll end up exploiting people because
Yep.
you'll start asking yourself, what is the limit of money that I need? And what am I willing to do to get there? The question's all wrong. So your morals and values aren't even embedded within that. I went to Morehouse College and their mission is around like this service-based leadership, right? And I love those original kind of insights and innovations of like the Googles and Apples. It wasn't ever about like how do we make money, but how do we make something that betters the world? Like
Yep.
if no one saw it at all, if nobody walked into my grandmother's doll shop, I would have made the potholders.
Right.
Made the potholders. I already made them. If nobody ever came into my apartment or into my studio or into my gallery, like the artwork would still get made. But then after it does, like after that value is there and you kind of feel it, it's like how do I make something that's helpful for other people? How do I create actual value?
Indeed.
I've heard people say when it comes to this is a very sometimes controversial thing to say when it comes to business, but a lot of our quote unquote biggest business were at one time like some of the biggest innovators, and when they came up with that one or two ideas, it shifted the entire market. And I've heard an analyst talk about it, and he said like Steve Jobs could never get paid back the amount of money that he gave to us in value and just raw
Sure.
architecture, cultural architecture,
No,
technology,
totally agree.
access to people because people are who inform the technology. That changed everything.
Totally agree. And you know, one could argue, and some people do, that, and not just nowadays like recency bias thing, but it does happen. It is happening more nowadays. But one could argue that you know, product development or product innovation without that sense of market, right? And just in the most broad sense of markets, or without that sense of real customer need, just kind of
Mhm.
inventing things for inventing sake, or creating new products for new product's sake to have a larger product SKU as a business. That's where we start to lose the fabric of it. That's where it starts to kind of fall apart. And then we wind up in this hyper consumerist society where then a lot of the consumers are like, that isn't even, I'm just consuming stuff because it's stuff and because I'm supposed to consume, I guess, because but I'm not even doing it because the things derive any joy for me. And that's where that's a big part of it is broken. You bridged us into a section that I want to make sure we talk about today.
Okay.
So I've got two more kind of different questions. So I want to talk about the economics of this, right? Not the how we make money as an artist, but I want to talk about kind of the aspirational part of this conversation. Yeah. So I have a question, and it's kind of a yes or no question, but then we'll take it from there. So can art or artistic creativity inside of community, any community, it could be a community of people, could be a geographic community, could be a neighborhood, right? Can art or artistic creativity inside of a community act as an economic engine? Can we look at communities that are vibrant or thriving across all areas, economically, socio-culturally, et cetera, and will we find art there present and vibrant, or does art play no role in that?
I mean, when I say, I don't know how to say yes more than yes, but money is not the most important thing in the world, but it's right up there with oxygen. Art and money could be neck and neck, and I think art might be a little bit more important. Okay. A little bit more important. It's not necessary for existence, I promise, but it's up there with oxygen because it's necessary for living.
Okay.
You could always tell, like, when there's vibrancy, whether there's connectedness, whether there's intellectual stimulus, whether there's purely, like, going back to like the etymology, inspiration, life breathing oxygen into the community. And when those things are happening, those are the things that draw business. So not in the bio for the intro, right? I'm on the board for this organization called Americans for the Arts. And we're one of the largest nonprofits in the United States for arts research, arts advocacy, convening of local arts agencies, and pushing that national agenda for the arts. We have years of experience and research around how arts single-handedly becomes that catalyst.
That's incredible.
Like every single time, like there's a theater in a space, local bars benefit, local restaurants benefit, business alliances, law firms, everything. When you think about corporate America, some of the biggest institutions have some of the most prominent art collections. There's some of the biggest sponsors and corporate donors to the largest arts institutions. And I said this earlier, and you can hear me getting a little bit passionate about it now. Like,
good.
It's one of those things, like it's so old that we think that it's cliche, but it's adage, it's maxim. We're expressing something that's close to soul, that we know what it is, but we don't necessarily know all the time how it may arise. Oh yeah, that art piece. The numbers are there, they correlate. And when you talk about economic stimulus and why this is like something that's very close to me, not just as an artist, but just as a Black man, as a first generation graduate, as a proud just Morehouse alum, and just advocate for the community. During the pandemic, artists were the first and most, like, right up there with any of the other work, like the first community to go under. No support.
Right.
We're still like seeing the impacts of like the actors strike.
Yep.
And I saw this post that that centered it to me. It said, these are the people that are suffering, like actually economically challenged, no support system, no framework from, at least here in America, like the government, in a way that we could continue our practice as if a researcher would, or as if a scientist or an inventor would. We were left by the wayside and left struggling in the world of fill in the blank.
Because as you say, there was a perception in a moment of genuine crisis. There was a perception that that art, right, wasn't vital, right, or that and therefore the artists like weren't vital. That wasn't the front line of this crisis. And while it wasn't acutely true, like it's part of the economic fabric of what makes any community. To your point,
but here's the thing that's amazing. And going back to like the ideas from and give me 1 second, because I'll actually find the numbers for you all. But going back to that idea, the quote that I saw that centered me in it, it said, although these are some of the folks that are like suffering the most within that same situation, like out of work, no economic cushion, very, very hard and dangerous for them to go in a situation. Said the artists were also a part of the front line.
Right.
They were part of the front line in terms of how we all healed as a community. And how do we know that? Every single person on every single employee survey from 2020 to today talked about how health and mental wellness became one of the primary focuses, and how they use creativity, artistic expression, working with their hands, working in the garden, or doing some other maker craft, made their life better, and being away from the office in dare I say it, in humanity.
Sure. No, and think about it. Even extending that out into our online digital life, like during the hardest periods of the strictest lockdowns, right? Like where it was the TikTok community, it was online, it was artists putting on concerts virtually, it was everybody in the traditional world of every industry trying to figure out how to adapt to being able to connect with their community and provide the same level of creativity and freedom of expression and whatnot. And that is, like you said, that's what held us together. So, okay. So I want to leap onto that question and go a level more specific, right? So you've already articulated very, very passionately and clearly, right? You have multiple points of deep interest that motivate you on a daily basis. And one of them happens to be who you are as a person, who you are as a Black man in this country, right? And so now that we've said we agree that art is a critical part of an economic engine of any community, let me ask you kind of a how do we? So how do we build up communities of color then, right? And these could be both geographic like communities or just virtual communities. How do we build up communities of color by leveraging this nexus of art, creativity, and entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I think
because you're doing it there in New York City in Harlem, but I mean, and like how do we do this?
There's I always talk about this idea of, like, when I summarize my work. So sometimes artist is, I would say, because of his age, I'll call it, that's my first and foremost title, artist with the big A. That is how I see the world. That is my profession. And again, I'm very big on like words and meaning. So going back to etymology, profession meaning truth. Art is my truth. That is how I see the world. That's my lens. So if I see the world through a perspective of art, then how do I use that? Or like you said, leverage that to bring more folks together. And I started to understand that how much power being a storyteller was, how much capital there was in art, and diving into it from like a practice standpoint with my own artwork and my own business, going into it from like an academic standpoint with like art history, political development, political philosophy, and where art is always at that, you could, every single person can visually see what movements or what decisions were made, right? When you think about like the Black Panthers, for examples, there's imagery around it. When you think about what else? The Black Panthers was like a really, really phenomenal example. The Harlem Renaissance is another one, right? When you think about these things, they're so impactful because of how well documented they are, and the things, just from my perspective, why they were a moment in time that we get to study and go back on, versus like a broader, let me not misspeak, they were a movement, and they were a movement. They were all broad movements, but now I'm zooming in back to like a moment and thinking almost like 100,000 feet, like a system.
Yeah.
How long standing was this? Because we're talking about creativity, we're talking about art and entrepreneurship. So when we think about entrepreneurship, we're thinking about companies, industrial psychology, systems thinking, and how that entity becomes a knowledge source and a being in itself, so that other people can come in and out of it and use the same exact model.
Yeah. No, I mean, and it sounds, I mean, at a very base level, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just this idea, like if you and I were to, just have carte blanche, and we could reinvent the world, and we could go over here and say like, okay, here's a neighborhood of a community of color, right? And so we've been hired to come in, the two of us, and help them figure out how to stimulate their community that they live in. One of the baseline things that you and I would do based on your thesis so far is we would say, where's your arts community within your community?
Where's our arts community?
Right. And then where are your artists? And then how can we bring some of those people's creativity like into the light? How can we literally it sounds like what you're saying, like how can we literally put a mural on the sides of these buildings? How can we literally create community theater spaces? How can we literally turn that park in the summertime into a gathering spot where people can share their plays or their written words or Shakespeare or whomever it is that they want to do? So part of it, what I'm hearing from you is like one of the ways we build up communities of any type, but in this particular example, communities of color, is by leveraging that unique artistic cultural history that they bring. Like they bring their own artistic interpretations from wherever their families emanated from, generations upon go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's this so when we think about, now I gave you guys the viewpoint of like creative, like what creative I think means. That's a process. So there's a creative process, there's a scientific process, there's all the other models that you could read about in like Decision Makers or Bain's BCG model, things like that. They're modalities for thinking. But then when you go back to art and what it is, it becomes again a philosophy. These are folks that are the dreamers, the visionaries that I loved how Louis C.K. put it. Instead of deja vu, things that I thought I saw before, he has vujade.
Okay.
So he looks at things as if for the first time.
Yeah.
That's the job of the artist, for us to come in and say, did anybody ever notice this? And we tell the story in such a way that folks are like, wow, I never got that. You go from art to thinking, to moving, to discussion, to discourse, to full-blown building and, again, architectural work. You need that. It's almost it's the spark. I mean, it's going back to inspiration. It's the breath.
Yep.
That's why that picture of Adam and God with the finger in the middle, that moment of creation becomes so important, because you just need the spark. If you're a biologist, you just need that one thing to go in the petri dish.
Yep.
From there, you just watch it blossom.
Okay, so you've done a great job of taking us out and taking us back in a couple of times today. So now I'm gonna take us even more narrow inside of this. So okay. now we're inside of this community, right? Any particular community. Not everybody is fortunate to grow up with your grandmother who can hand them a bunch of yarn and a corner in the shop to go work on and get inspired to start as a 4 or 5, 6-year-old, right? So So in your present life today, how do you or the people that are in your close group, in your circles, how are you guys using art to inspire young people to invest in not just themselves, right, and to believe in themselves, but also to invest in their communities?
Thank you for that. And again, if we had like a week, we'd be able to get into like these deeper topics. I think because my mind is like,
we might just have to bring you back for a couple of. We'll just make this like a recurring thing.
For me, there's I'm a part-time teacher, and I have been for a very long time. I grew up as a kind of latchkey kid. So when I wasn't with grandma, literally it's, TV, set it and forget it. We do like a couple of family meals a week and some family vacations. But I had a bunch of activities that they were just scheduled out. Things that I was supposed to do and, blah, 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 blah. So one of those bigger activities was the Boys and Girls Club. I was a part of them throughout my entire life. My parents were in the military. We traveled a lot. And that became one of the brands that we just loved, trusted. If you go to a new community, you sign up for the Boys and Girls Club. You go there, meet some new folks, and figure out what they like, right? So from there, I mean, that community, that aspect, that education piece, I don't know. I always just kind of enjoyed, teaching. I come from a big family. I'm the oldest boy of a family of 8, 4 boys and 4 girls. And it's a very wide gap, right? It's 2 tranches.
Okay.
The group of us that are between, like maybe mid-30s to late 20s. And then there's the middle school to elementary now.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So there's again, we were always just together. We were always like teaching each other new things, having the discussion around like favorite topics or tastes. And I always loved education. That arts education piece is super important. Sorry, rambled a little bit, but
No, no.
that's huge. It's huge. I said earlier, my mom had it was mandatory. And I have to say the arts education piece is mandatory because
Yep.
if I went back to Plato, that would be what I'm saying when I talk about how society should be structured.
Okay.
People, that's how vitally important art is. We have to have it.
Yep. You'll appreciate this little anecdotal story. So this couple of weeks in particular, I'm down here at a family's house, my friend, family by choice. And so my nieces are around. The 16-year-old is finishing sophomore year of high school this year. She's a super creative kid. She doesn't know it yet. She's destined to be a writer. She's a talented communicator. She's an amazing storyteller. She's a passionate, emotive person. And so she says to me last night, like, Uncle Rob, man, I mean, hey, I'm just not a STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. I'm just not a STEM girl. And I looked at her, I was like, Gabby, let me tell you something. I don't know when they did it, sometime over the last 10, 15 years or so. And they stripped a letter out of that. I go, because that, when I was not a kid, but when I was raising my daughter, her basically older cousin, I said that phrase in academics in the US, even, so not like in some faraway place, was STEAM.
Yeah.
It was science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. Yeah. I was like, and then we just like straight up like stripped the A right out. I was like, so I'm here to tell you, guess what? Like, you're not good at some superfluous thing that isn't important to society. Exactly. Like, you're really good at something that is critically important to society, which society used to realize was critically important to it and value it. And only in this recent life period has society like kind of lost its way and stripped that A out. Yeah. And that's to your point, right? So it's like it used to literally be mandatory. Now it's not even on the docket curriculum wise anymore.
And again, that's nuts. So when you say like, how do we inspire the next generation? There's a great organization that I still work with called the Broadway Foundation, right? And it's a year-long program for mentorship and leadership development founded by Adina Menzel.
Wow. Yeah.
In the summer, they do the sleepaway camp where they take different girls from around the city that could be from low income or otherwise just diverse or at-risk schools, neighborhoods, whatever it is. There's a very thorough, I don't want to call it vetting process, but they make sure to get as many people as possible. And then after we come together and start doing our workshops and our lessons, I remember one of the very first classes that I did for them was around arts as a vehicle for community activism. So it was never like Pablo Picasso said that I don't make art to decorate the wall. I make art to arm the revolutionaries.
That's
a weapon to a creative mind. So when I say this is the art is something that I make to just have the conversation.
Yeah.
My first class for them was, this is how you connect the artwork with the message.
This is I mean, you're mentoring them on expression. Yeah. I mean, on human expression, and art as various types of art as mediums for that.
And I think we have to keep doing that. Like, that's the part where, again, there were no classes. Grandma didn't say this. She simply modeled it.
Yeah.
She still does reading classes to this day. She still volunteers.
I love that.
Winter, like, people donate yarn to her so she can knit scarves for all the local schools. And
amazing.
There was never a conversation that was like, well, Robert, you should teach somebody else. Everywhere we went, she was teaching me something. And I was very, for a while, it seemed like I was a little ornery, right? Like, I had that attitude and didn't want to deal with anybody. But Grandma was one of the first people that realized I was interested. So when people gave me answers versus gave me dialogue, as a young man, it frustrated me because I'm like, well, I don't think that answer doesn't fit for the way I see it. But if you told me how you did it, then maybe, I could kind of move around that. So it was almost genetic, and then it was modeled, and then I'll go back right where I started. Art from the mastery standpoint.
Yeah,
I was an apprentice at a very early age. That's what was. That's what it
That's
was.
boy. There, you just. I think that's again. That's going to be one of the punchlines of this episode. Is that's another aspect of society and just how we pass down knowledge and how we share information, and we've lost that connectivity of the apprentice, right?
Yeah.
Just in anything. I mean, it doesn't have to just be an apprentice in the trades or an apprentice in the arts. You can apprentice anybody at anything, because essentially that's what you were doing, like at a very young age, without any say in it, so to speak. Like you were apprenticing your grandmother, right?
So
And when we say modeling, your grandmother was very informally, helping you become her apprentice, in a very informal way.
So here's the big here's a connector, right? And this is where we go from 4-year-old Robert to 20 something Robert in New York, right? We go from Black Wall Street to New York Wall Street, and you start noticing, or as you start learning about the companies and the culture embedded within them, you start noticing that the difference between maybe JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, and Morgan Stanley, and I got to do the latter, was how they mentored or did not mentor the professionals. And one of the things that I was most excited about when I came to New York and was able to work with Morgan Stanley was that I came into a financial apprenticeship. It was a 2-year fellowship program where I just sat there and, I could present as many stupid ideas as I wanted to, or good ideas. I had a structured workshop mentality of like professional development and all the different speaking engagements. Because again, they believed in inspiration. We didn't call it that, but it was inspiration. You need to hear about somebody that was successful so that you need to go to the workshop. It was 2 years worth of apprenticeship. And by the time I finished the apprenticeship, and my whole like time there was 4 years, so that was about at the 2.5 year mark. I will never forget. And this is not. I would love to get an MBA, and I'm on the fence about going back to get one. But I will never forget. They hired an MBA as an entry level analyst, and I was the one managing him.
Wow.
And I realized, going back to entrepreneurship, experience is gold, studying is silver.
Wow, that's powerful.
So
that's a beautiful way to articulate it.
So that was again. There's a reason why academics is important. I think about that as a system as well.
Yep.
Creativity, entrepreneurship as a system, academics. So I may be able to come back later as like Dr. Newman or something like that. Hopefully,
No, it's incredible. All right. So I want us to because it would be a shame if we didn't touch on some of this. For those that are going to be watching / listening to this on YouTube when it comes out, they're going to be able to see your background, and they're going to be able to see, I'm assuming, probably a mix of some of your work behind you on the wall, and then probably some work of others. So I want to hit on kind of 2, 3, maybe kind of shorter discussion questions around your work. I just want to talk about your work. I want to talk about your creativity for a bit. Right. So first things first, just in if anybody looks you up and researches you like we did to prepare for this, they're going to find that you have you're known for a very specific point of view, right? So the question is, you have done some amazing work that is focused on the narratives of Black Americans, Black folks who have, from the post-Civil War Reconstruction era, right? And as a young man in modern America who didn't live through that, right, himself, I would like you to explain to me, elaborate on why that historical perspective is so important to you.
Forgive me in advance. I am Southern by nature, so sometimes I have an example, and then I get to the answer.
It's all good.
I remember Grandma. Grandma's lessons are crazy. Bill Weathers has a song called "Grandma's Hands." Go listen to it, because I promise that's every time I say Grandma, that's what I think. Grandma's hands.
Okay.
Anyway, Grandma told me that when I go somewhere, take all you can get when you get there. And I said, okay, no big deal. When I got to corporate America, she said, Robert, sign up for all the classes, because I remember when I first started my job and I signed up for this class or that class, I ended up like developing a software or a program. And it gave me opportunities that I never thought I would have, but I didn't know that I couldn't do the thing, or that I could, because I just, for lack of imagination. Most people in America think 1 thing, 2 things, 3 things, and that might be my limit. But dare I say it, you don't even know what you could be. And I hope that you get to the end of your life thinking that, oh, I tapped out on trying new things, and you never actually got to the 15 or 18 or 25 things that you might be the perfect person for. So when I got to corporate America, I became a fire marshal for all of my floors, deputy fire marshal, and they told me about the fire extinguisher. There's the ABC: electrical, chemical, and brush fires. And if you go to a fire with the wrong type of extinguisher, it will make the problem worse. Post Civil War Reconstruction era, there was something that was going on right after the Emancipation Proclamation. There was something that was going on right before, actually, and just a small tidbit. People, because of narrative, because of stories, because of how we understand culture and history, we think about the trauma of slavery and the pan African slave trade, and we don't realize that when America was forming, it was not binary. It was 5 or 6 or 7 dimensional. So there were people that were coming over that were Black, there were doctors, there were lawyers, there were scientists, there were civil engineers, and they were some of the architects for this country. They were just building. So by the time Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation and started to understand that, and this is a bigger moral argument for, again, a different podcast. And one of my favorite business professors, this is our favorite thing to like go back and forth on from philosophy. She said Lincoln made the moral decision, and I told her he made an American politician and capitalist decision. And we were always trying to figure out whether it was like 51-49. It was never like 60-40. It was always a little bit of percentage, but
I would agree.
My tactic for her was always that he knew that he needed people that knew the land. There was no way for him to unite the South with the North, knowing that, here's an ironic tidbit. My name is Robert Newman III. And Robert E. Lee was the best general at the time in the United States. Lincoln has quoted that multiple times. Yep. He knew that once Lee walked away, the war was all but lost.
Right.
And he had to figure out some way to, I'm telling you, it's black and white. He says to preserve the Union.
Yep.
So once he signed the Emancipation Proclamation, there weren't just folks that were in chattel slavery, the thing that was the most horrific thing that we are still trying to recover from. There were folks that were in the Maroons. There were folks that were in the Gullah Geechee Islands. There were folks that were in the Great Swamp. They were fine and ready to start Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Atlanta, North Carolina, Harlem, Chicago, Detroit, and we go on and on and on. There was something that happened in that period where we saw an explosion almost of Black politicians, Black civil engagement, Black financial literacy as a whole, Black education, and community empowerment, even that idea of the circulation of the dollar. All of these things were, dare I say it was a booming startup.
And so you've obviously, I mean, this perspective is incredible. You've for a variety of different reasons and influences and curiosities, because you're that guy, right? You've appreciated that reading of history, of that moment in history, that period, that era, and you're like, I could express, and you could express your art about your community and the Black community and the Black experience, and again, through a million different lenses if you like, but you've chosen that one because what I'm hearing you say, this is just my interpretation of your words, is like there was a unique combination of attributes and experiences and people at that time that if we want to look for models, like, right, because you're very much a process person, right? So if we want to look back for models on how to replicate and how to repeat or how to do things better, like I'm telling you, like, and so your artistic expression that literally shows up sometimes on canvas is to highlight the stories of that era, to draw people's curiosity back to that era. Because again, you just told us that you use the art as the catalyst for the conversation.
Yep.
Right. And so we want to draw people's attention to this post-Civil War Reconstruction era for a variety of lessons that that are laying inside of it, just waiting to be pulled back out. That is both deep and incredible. No, I mean that. But okay, Lincoln would be my favorite president for a whole wide variety of reasons.
For a whole variety.
I've always said that. I'm from Chicago, so Illinois. There's that history, right? So this is really fascinating to me, and is a whole separate conversation. Then this is literally a separate podcast, which is awesome. But thank you for that answer.
This is why we need discourse, not answers.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Lincoln was a model, but then when we start that discourse again, right? When we say like, well, what were those? What was the 49 versus the 51?
Yep.
Or let me say the fire extinguisher one more time.
Yeah.
We're facing specific problems now, and there's a lot of different models to pull from, but this one, there were some success cases there that I'm seeing being modeled now in companies like Afrofuture, for example, who's starting to do things very analogous with Marcus Garvey, for example. I'm starting to see this reverse migration going back to places like Atlanta and Birmingham and Arkansas. You're starting to see these cities and states where they're, in terms of political power, are flipping from, again, conservative to Democrat. And these things are happening because models.
Yeah. No, and Robert, and this is an ultimate compliment. If you know me well enough, and we're obviously going to get to know each other better and become friends the rest of our lives, but models in history, man, like what you've done.
History.
I mean, right, what you've done.
God, the history.
What you've done today is you've proved that, like, unless we understand history, we don't understand where we're going. Right. And so, and what you're doing,
failure is that we're so curious about so many things that we go outward, but we fail to like literally just come in to learn about ourselves. The biggest argument for me and my grandmother today has been about our family tree and when she's ready to publish. She has a publish date that may be a few years out. I'm telling her we have to open source this thing today. We have to. We have to.
Okay, I got to ask, just so because it would be a shame if we didn't. What is your grandma's name and how old is she?
Oh my goodness. She is Linda Wilson. I will send her this video, and she's going to be very upset that I mentioned her. She just had her birthday on April 18th. And funny segue. My very first art show in New York City was on April 18th.
That's so
it was one of those things that
that's symmetry, man.
You can't make it up. It happens like that. So the entire day, like we were just talking like just back and forth, and I would get in trouble if I reveal her age.
Now that we've mentioned her and she may watch this, Grandma Linda, I'm sorry I even asked the age question. Forget it. We're gonna strike that.
We're not going to talk about her age, but
no, she is who she is. That's all that matters.
Suffice to say, she was when it's beautiful even to this day. I have to extract. I have to it's like pulling teeth. I have to sit at the feet of her as an ancestor. I have to be a consummate student and make sure that I ask different questions, because sometimes I'll ask, well, what were some of the big projects that you worked on? And then she'll finally tell me that, well, actually, she was an artist in resident of Oklahoma, the entire state. Yeah. I'll say, well, what were some movements that, made you excited or that you were involved in? She'll say, well, yeah, John Hope Franklin is in our family. He was one of the first Black lawyers in Oklahoma, and the idea of archival work has been passed down to you since generations. And I get upset because I say, well, Grandma, when are you going to publish the book?
I was just going to say, right, because part of you're like, how did I not know that? How have I been your grandson? Right. But that's also the humility that comes with her generation and just obviously how she was raised. And so it's not about her. It's not about her.
I'm going to keep underscoring this because I know you're going to get to it, but modeling, mentorship, and being able to see it first, apprenticeship. There's one of my best friends said, you can't be what you can't see.
No, 100%.
The idea of I'll do another tangent, but I won't. The idea of being able to see somebody in front of you as opposed to like do as I say, not as I do.
Yep.
Our brains aren't like that. We're social animals.
Yep.
If you lean a certain way, I'll lean a certain way. If you cross your arms, I'll cross my arms.
Yep.
If you're excited, I'm excited. So if you're a person that's willing to teach, I'll teach. If
Right.
you're a person that's about community, I'll be about community. And
Yeah.
I was very particular about making sure that she modeled everything for me. So by the time she actually gave me the insight of where she gleaned these models from, and maybe this is where I am in my journey. I'm out of the apprenticeship. Maybe I'm in the
Yep.
journey stage, right?
No, right. No, I mean, you could still be, I think, right, humbly, you could still be apprenticing from her because,
Yeah, for
you're,
sure.
but while also being the master of where you've gotten to for those that are coming up behind you, right? I mean, that's just, I often say to young entrepreneurs who are, maybe in their 20s or early 30s, and they'll say to me, like Rob, how do I become that, right? And I'm like, well, that you just said is like what you are when you're a 40-year-old entrepreneur. And I'm like, and guess what? There are no magic beans. I can't make you a 40-year-old person with 40-year-old life experiences and 40-year-old wisdom until you're 40 years old. Like
You will never be able to say that you were at your client's kid's bar mitzvah until you've been an entrepreneur for that long.
Part of the lovable part of my like kind of lovable Uncle Rob brand of
Yeah.
and of life and whatnot is just is simply because, as I joke sometimes, I'm like, hey, it's not just I have some special set of skills or I've done. Yes, I put in a lot of work. Yes, I'm grateful for all the. But at the end of the day, it's just I'm 55, almost 56 years old. I've literally just simply lived long enough. I'm still here and I'm still absorbing new lessons, experiences, inspirations, context. I'm curious like you, right? So that's part of
Can we
life.
talk about that then? I'll break down curiosity into what you just said, into patience.
Please do.
Curiosity is this wonderful cross section of patience and engagement, right? Entrepreneurship is not an exercise of I'm sitting on my hands waiting for the big opportunity.
There you go.
I'm working actively. So when the opportunity comes, hopefully I met it in the middle. Maybe I met it when it first started. Maybe I was late to it, but the opportunity is still there. It doesn't matter. But there's this idea that, okay, things are moving, I'm progressing and I'm building, but I'm always curious, I'm always iterative. And the fact that time is an ally in that. That's how patience in the sense of sitting on my hands is like you wait long enough, the thing will come your way. That's just luck and probability. That's not patience. Nope. Patience is if I work hard enough at it and I stay committed long enough, I may get something uncommon. I may actually get something rare that most folks may not have got. But I have to stay engaged. I have to stay committed.
100% true.
Committed for the long term. That's what I think I really mean with patience. But then curious, right? I gotta engage with this thing. So every day I come back, art and business, I have to reframe it again to say, did I ask all the questions?
You're
did
fine.
I see it from all the perspectives?
Yes, right.
I see it in this light. Is it different?
Exactly.
What about at this light? Who's the audience? What is it? What am I trying to communicate? I noticed this today. That's the creative process. You start from different places, but yeah, man,
very, very much true. All right, so we're gonna wrap up this episode. We'll be back for future episodes, but we're gonna wrap up this episode, and I'm gonna ask you to give a couple of practical steps, maybe 2 or 3 practical steps or tactics, strategies, and I'm gonna briefly touch on something that we didn't talk about, and it's okay that we didn't talk about it today because I think what we did talk about is much more important, honestly. But we did go from 4-year-old Robert in Tulsa in grandma's shop to who you are today, and there's been a whole journey, and there was a corporate section in there, and there was an apprenticeship at Morgan Stanley, and that's fine, and we're not going to talk about all that today, but I do want you give a little roadmap, 2 or 3 steps for someone who's in a corporate career, a corporate life, but has these creative skills or these creative passions in them. What can they do? What are those first couple of steps that they can take to try and just consider and pursue this path for themselves?
I'll do 3. And I'll be quick because I want it to be very, very, very tactical. Commerce, community, creativity. Those are the things that I exist in, and I'll start with creativity. That's the one at the bottom. As a creative, it's important to remember you need to be as unbridled as possible with the way that you get to your solution, and as relentless as possible as an editor. Make things, create things, innovate out of those spots that you actually overflow from. It was exciting for me throughout my entire life and career to always pour into things that I was passionate about before I was business savvy about. Because business is a competitive sport. It's not a passionate sport. It's not a friendly sport. So you need the passion to have the energy, to have the adrenaline, to have whatever it is, whether it's the just insight around what you need to do. But creativity, that's my first lesson.
Okay.
Tactics, you need to be relentless as an editor. Go back, look at your work, figure out what you could have done better. But as a creative, be unbridled. Don't let anything limit you. Not feedback, not your thoughts where you are today. Like, you actually do not have an idea of where you actually could be. There's so many things in life that could change, like your path today. That's my creative. I'll leave that there. Community. Once you figure out the self piece, community. Be authentic. Find the people that you're interested in finding. That's the easy one. Like, start with admiration. Find those folks. Like, you like them, go find where they're at. Like, look up their events, or look up what they like, or if they're on social media and have a public page. Any of those things, because once you find things that you're interested in, your brain almost does this like fixation where it forms ways for you to get there. That's the creative part. That's why that was the base.
Yeah.
The community, you start from where you're drawn to, and then the second piece is listening. The second piece is listening, right? I love this idea. Is I believe Japanese called ikigage. Is what I'm passionate about, what I'm good at. It's what people appreciate from me, and then what brings me kind of like the most fulfillment and joy.
So find your tribe. Right. Figure out yourself, find your tribe look for that community, find community. And then when you get into community,
what they like,
listen, ask questions, as you said before, ask questions, ask good questions, ask the right question, be engaged, right? Be interested, be interested in other people, as you said. And that then solidifies community. And then you said there's one more C. There's 3 C's. There's one more, you said. It was the last one.
The last one is commerce.
Okay.
So once you get to the top one, and again, we're talking about entrepreneurial thinking.
Yep.
Now you have to be rigid about the goal and flexible about the means. So there's a lot of artists that I talk to when we do like professional development or mentorship around like art pricing. They say, well, I want to sell this piece for, $100,000. And I say, well, are you set on the price? Of course I'm set on the price. And then I say, well, you have to be flexible on the means that you get to the price. You can't do the pop-ups. You have to do the art fairs because your buyer is somewhere else. Commerce. Where do people buy this? Not how do people appreciate it. We're not talking about the cultural or the educational or the community good aspect anymore. Commerce is a different C. So when we talk about diamonds, color, cut, clarity, creativity, community, and commerce. If we're talking about the business of art, you got to figure out who your tribe is. You got to figure out like the ways you could be inspired to create and endlessly do that. And then you have to be okay with pivoting from pothole to painting.
Yeah, I love that. That's right there is a home run summary statement. This was such a joy. I expected a great conversation, and again, we don't know each other super well, but we have enough in common, and we have a couple of people in common, and we had a shared experience last year with you volunteering for one of our mentorship programs that I knew enough about you to know that this would be a good conversation. But I got to tell you, Robert Lee, the Newsom III, like I did not expect this to be this enjoyable a conversation. Your energy just came through. So we've covered the continent today from LA to New York. It's been joyful. That's the best word I can use to describe it. So I'm grateful to you for your energy and your thoughtfulness. There's a lot to unpack here that people are going to be able to pull on. This is going to be one of those I suspect people are going to listen to a few times because I think there's just so much to pull apart. But it was just a great joy. I do look forward to future conversations, whether they be on this podcast or just us on the phone. unpacking and exploring some of the rest of what we touched on today, but we didn't really even dive deeper into. You're an impressive young man, and you are modeling for others, regardless of their how they look and feel or where they come from. You're modeling how to express yourself, how to articulate your viewpoint on the world, how to create, how to communicate, which really just winds up being art. I mean, that is art. Art is just, as you, I think you said it at one point, right? This is a human endeavor that we're all part of, and
Yeah.
art is a part of the expression of being human. And so you're doing an incredible job of that. Before we end, let's make sure we will put a bunch of the things that were referenced in the show notes. So don't worry about that. We'll reference books. We'll reference the different things that you talked about, as far as places people can go to find the resources. But how can people find you either there in the community in Harlem? How can people connect with you or find you on social media? Let's list those out for folks.
Yeah, if you guys want to keep up with me, I am Robert the Artist, Rob's Art on Instagram at RXBART. Fun story with that. The X is a variable. I love it because of Malcolm X, because of Harlem, but because I'm relentless as a creative. The X means I could do anything.
Good for you.
RXBART, Rob Art. If you all want to keep up with the gallery that I just became the lead programmer and director of, Artful Walls Gallery, with 2 L's, Artful Walls Gallery, so 6 L's altogether, but you'll be able to see the gallery.
It'll be listed in the notes.
Yep, sure. It's one of the biggest galleries in New York City, the #1 largest physical art space outside of the Studio Museum and National Black Theater here in Harlem. And I'm excited for my tenure there to start telling more of these stories, capturing this culture, and really at least, proliferating some of these models. And again, I'm super excited to come back. I'm super excited to be here, and let's keep doing the good work. Let's keep doing.
That's it, man.
The 2 Robs come together. I already know it's a good time.
100%, right? 2 Robs are always better than 1, man. Come on, we know that. All right, that's awesome. Thank you, man. Have a great rest of your evening.
All right, thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode as much as I did recording it. As always, we thank you so much for listening and watching. Today's show was recorded here in Los Angeles and produced by the incomparable Deanna Bernal in Mexico City. We can only grow this show by you listening and sharing the show with friends. So please find, follow, subscribe, and share our audio-only show on Spotify, Apple, or via any other popular podcasting platforms, as well as find the video version of our show now available on our YouTube channel over at Entrepreneurial Thinkers. And of course, you can follow along on our various social media platforms for fun and informative clips and content at Entrepreneurial Thinkers, wherever you can find us. And if you'd like to connect with me, you can find me at I Am Rob Ryan on just about any social media platform. Gracias, thank you, and have an awesome day.